When a liberal TV host attempted to ambush Donald Trump with questions about his marriage on live television, she had no idea it would turn into the biggest mistake of her career. But before we dive in, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. It was prime time, a major network, with millions watching live. The host was infamous for her gotcha moments with conservative guests. Tonight, she believed she had the perfect trap set. Her team had spent weeks crafting questions designed to humiliate Trump and attack his family values. But she had no clue what was about to unfold. As the cameras started rolling, Trump sat calmly in his chair, while the host wore that signature, artificial smile often seen on media elites when they think they're about to destroy someone's reputation. 3, 2, 1. What happened next would not only shatter her career but also showcase what standing up for real family values looks like. And it all began with what seemed like an innocent question. Mr. Trump, you've built an empire, become president, and influenced millions. Would you say you're just lucky? She delivered it with that practiced smile, the kind that makes you wonder what's really behind it. But Trump had seen this game before: start soft, then twist the knife. He leaned forward slightly, his expression a mix of confidence and amusement. You know, it's interesting you ask that, Trump responded, his voice steady and measured. Liberals love that word, lucky. They use it to diminish success, to suggest that hard work and sacrifice don't matter. But let me tell you something about luck: it doesn't build skyscrapers, it doesn't create thousands of jobs, and it certainly doesn't make America great. You could see it in the host's eyes. This wasn't the defensive response she had hoped for. But she pressed on, her smile tightening just a fraction. So you're saying everything you've achieved is purely through hard work? I'm saying, Trump replied, his voice gaining intensity, that success comes to those who earn it. Yes, I've been blessed, but I've also worked harder than most people can imagine. I've had nights where I didn't sleep, deals that seemed impossible, challenges that would have broken many others. But here's what really matters: I've never done it alone. The host's eyebrows raised slightly. There it was, the opening she thought she had been waiting for. Little did she know, she was walking right into a conversation that would expose far more about herself than about her target. Not alone? She asked, her voice dripping with false curiosity. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the people behind Donald Trump. Of course, Trump continued. When you mention the people behind me, you're probably thinking of my business partners, my advisors. But let me tell you who really deserves the credit: my family, particularly Melania. The host's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, like a predator sensing weakness. She thought she had found her angle. Ah, yes. Melania. You know, many people wonder about her role in all of this. Some say she's rather quiet for such a powerful man's wife. Trump's eyes narrowed slightly. The studio air grew thick with tension as he replied, quiet? No. Dignified? Yes. There's a big difference. Though I understand why some in the media might not grasp that concept. A nervous titter rippled through the audience. The host shifted in her chair, clearly not expecting this pushback. But she pressed on, her voice taking on a concerned tone that fooled no one. Well, what I mean is, we rarely hear from her. Unlike other political wives who are very visible. Don't you think the public deserves to know more about the woman behind Donald Trump? The public, Trump responded, his voice carrying a mix of pride and protective steel, knows exactly what they need to know about Melania. She's brilliant, accomplished, and chooses her moments carefully, unlike some who feel the need to fill every silence with noise. The audience murmured in approval. The host's practiced smile faltered for a moment as she realized her usual tactics weren't working. But instead of backing off, she decided to push harder. Let's talk about those accomplishments, she said, her tone shifting to something more aggressive. Because some people say, well, they wonder if her main achievement isn't simply being Mrs. Donald Trump. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Trump's expression hardened, and even the cameramen exchanged glances. What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in television history. Trump leaned in slightly, his expression now carrying a sharper edge. "Let me be very clear about something," he said. "Since you want to talk about achievements, let's talk facts. Melania speaks 5 languages fluently. She has built her own successful career. She has represented our country with more grace and dignity than many so-called leaders. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because the mainstream media is too busy pushing their own narrative." The host's smile stiffened, her grip on the conversation slipping. But she wasn't ready to give up just yet. "Of course, Mr. Trump," she said, forcing a chuckle. "But don't you think being married to you has opened certain doors for her?" Trump let out a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You know what's interesting about that question? It shows exactly what's wrong with how some people think. Success isn't about doors being opened, it's about what you do once you're in the room. And Melania, she doesn't just walk through doors, she transforms every room she enters." A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. The host's face flushed slightly as she realized her angle was failing. But she wasn't done. "Surely," she pressed on, her voice now tinged with a hint of desperation, "you must admit that your wealth and influence affect how people see her." Trump's response was immediate and razor-sharp. "You mean how people like you see her? Because let me tell you something about influence and wealth. They don't create character, they reveal it. And what Melania has revealed, through every challenge, every attack, every unfair criticism, is exactly why I'm proud to have her by my side." The host's smile had completely vanished now, but she was about to make her biggest mistake yet. "Well, since you mentioned having her by your side," she said, her tone growing bolder, "let's talk about that. Your lifestyle, Mr. Trump. The constant spotlight, the pressure, the scrutiny. Don't you think it's challenging for someone who didn't seek this kind of attention?" Trump's expression didn't change, but there was a shift in the air. "You know what's really challenging," he countered. "Watching the media twist everything into their own narrative. Melania didn't just adapt to this life, she thrived in it. Despite constant attacks from people who claim to champion women's empowerment." The host leaned forward, sensing what she thought was a weak spot. "But the pressure must be enormous, the constant travel, the public appearances, the expectations. Some might say it's almost like a golden cage." Trump's eyebrows raised slightly. "A golden cage? That's an interesting choice of words. Tell me something, why is it that strong, independent women are celebrated by the media unless they happen to be conservative? Then suddenly, they must be trapped." He gestured toward the audience. "Then suddenly, they must be in a cage." The audience murmured in agreement. The host's composure cracked slightly as she realized her narrative was backfiring. "I'm simply suggesting," she tried to recover, "that perhaps this isn't the life she envisioned for herself, being constantly in your shadow." Trump chuckled, shaking his head. "My shadow? I think you're confusing shadows with spotlights. Melania doesn't walk in anyone's shadow. She shines in her own right. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Because your kind of journalism isn't about truth, it's about creating shadows where there aren't any." The studio grew unnaturally quiet. The host's producer was frantically speaking into her earpiece, but she had already committed to her course. She was about to cross a line that would make television history, and not in the way she'd hoped. Her next question would shock everyone in the room. "Mr. Trump," she said, dropping all pretense of professionalism, "let's be direct. You're a powerful, wealthy man. You could have any woman you want. Yet you stay with someone who's," she paused for effect, "aging alongside you. Don't you ever think about trading up?" The silence that fell over the studio was deafening. Several audience members audibly gasped. Trump sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable for a long moment. "Trading up," he finally repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Let me tell you something about value, since that seems to be all you understand. In business, yes, sometimes you trade up. You find a better deal, a newer model, a shinier option. But we're not talking about real estate or cars here. We're talking about my wife. My partner. The mother of my son. He leaned forward, his eyes locked onto the host. And let me tell you what real value is. Real value is someone who stands by you when the cameras are off. Real value is someone who tells you the truth when everyone else tells you what you want to hear. Real value is loyalty, integrity, and character, something that clearly isn't taught in journalism school anymore. The host's face had turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but Trump wasn't finished. You know what's really fascinating, he continued, his voice gaining strength. You sit there asking if I've thought about trading up while demonstrating exactly why your ratings are trading down. Because you don't understand real value. You don't understand real relationships. And you certainly don't understand real respect. The audience erupted in scattered applause. But the worst was yet to come for the host. Her attempted recovery would only dig her hole deeper. The host, now visibly rattled, attempted to regain control of the conversation. She straightened her posture and forced a smile. Mr. Trump, I think you're misinterpreting my question. I was simply. Trump raised a hand, cutting her off. No, you weren't simply doing anything. You were implying that loyalty, commitment, and real relationships are outdated concepts. And that, right there, is the problem with the media today. The audience remained silent, captivated by the exchange. The host's hands clenched slightly as she shuffled through her notes, searching for a way out of the situation she had created. All right, she said, her voice regaining some composure. Let's shift the focus. Some critics argue that Melania has remained in the background too much. That she hasn't been as vocal in policy matters as other first ladies. Do you think that's fair? Trump leaned back in his chair, a knowing smirk crossing his face. Let me tell you something about fairness. The same media that claims to champion women's choices constantly criticizes my wife for making her own. Melania doesn't need to be loud to be influential. She doesn't need to seek attention to make a difference. Her grace, her intelligence, and her actions speak louder than words. But that doesn't fit your narrative, does it? The host opened her mouth to respond, but Trump continued. You see, the real issue here isn't Melania. It's the double standard. If she were constantly on television, pushing an agenda, you'd call her too controlling. If she chooses dignity and privacy, you call her absent. The truth is, no matter what she does, people like you will find something to criticize. Because that's how your industry works. A few members of the audience clapped in agreement. The host's eyes darted to her producer, who was furiously gesturing for her to move on. But she wasn't ready to concede just yet. But Mr. Trump, she pressed, don't you think that in today's political climate, being more vocal is necessary? Trump shook his head. Being loud for the sake of being loud? No. That's what politicians do when they have nothing of substance to offer. Melania speaks when she has something meaningful to say. That's what true leadership looks like. The audience murmured again, this time in clear support. The host, sensing her grip on the conversation slipping further, tried another approach. Many people wonder, she said carefully, if Melania ever disagrees with you behind closed doors. Does she challenge you? Or does she simply support whatever you say? Trump chuckled, shaking his head. Melania is one of the most intelligent people I know. And yes, she challenges me. That's part of why I respect her so much. A strong marriage isn't about blind agreement, it's about balance, honesty, and pushing each other to be better. The host seemed momentarily at a loss. This wasn't the caricature she had expected to paint. But then, with one last effort, she tried to shift the narrative again. One final question, Mr. Trump, she said. There have been rumors, unverified, of course, that Melania spends more time away from you than people realize. Some speculate that your marriage is more of an arrangement than a romantic partnership. How do you respond to that? Trump's expression turned cold. The audience felt the shift immediately. You know, he said slowly, this is exactly why people don't trust the media anymore. You take baseless speculation and present it as if it's worth discussing. My wife and I share something real. We've built a life together. And no amount of gossip, no amount of clickbait, will ever change that. The host swallowed, realizing she had lost. Trump leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Maybe, just maybe, instead of trying to create controversy where there is none, the media should focus on reporting the truth. But that wouldn't get ratings, would it? Silence filled the studio. The host, defeated, looked down at her notes. Before she could muster a response, the producer's voice boomed over the speakers. We'll be right back after this commercial break. As the cameras faded to black, Trump leaned back in his chair, the smirk returning to his face. The moment would soon go viral. But for now, the battle was over. As the commercial break ended, the cameras flickered back on, and the host forced a composed expression, though her confidence had visibly waned. The battle had shifted, and she knew she had lost ground. But she still had time to reclaim control, at least, that's what she told herself. She glanced at her notes and cleared her throat. Mr. Trump, let's move to a broader topic. Your presidency was marked by strong stances on economic policy, foreign relations, and national security. But many argue that your approach was divisive. Would you agree? Trump smirked. You mean, was I tough? Absolutely. Did I put America first? No doubt about it. And if that's what you call divisive, then so be it. The truth is, real leadership isn't about making everyone happy. It's about making the right decisions. And sometimes, the right decisions make people uncomfortable. The audience murmured in response, some nodding in agreement. The host, however, was determined to steer the conversation back into territory where she felt she had an advantage. But some say that your approach alienated key allies and made America more isolated on the global stage, she countered. Trump leaned forward slightly. Let me tell you something. Strength earns respect. Weakness invites chaos. The same people who claim I alienated allies conveniently ignore the fact that under my leadership, NATO members finally started paying their fair share. They ignore that we brokered historic peace deals in the Middle East. They ignore that America's economy was stronger than it had been in decades. So tell me, was that really isolation, or was it leadership? The host hesitated. Trump wasn't giving her the sound bites she wanted. Instead, he was turning every question into a showcase of his accomplishments. She flipped through her notes again. Let's talk about the economy. Some experts argue that the financial success during your administration was largely the result of policies set in motion before you took office. How do you respond to that? Trump chuckled. Oh, of course. When things go well, it's because of my predecessors. But when things go wrong, it's all my fault, right? That's the media's favorite trick. But here's the reality, we cut taxes, we slashed regulations, we brought jobs back to America. Wages were rising, unemployment was at record lows, and businesses were thriving. That didn't just happen by accident. It happened because we made smart, America First policies. The audience applauded, and the host's smile faltered. She quickly moved to her next question, trying to regain her footing. You've often clashed with the media, calling it biased and dishonest. But don't you think a free press is essential to democracy? Trump nodded. A free press? Absolutely. A dishonest press? That's the problem. The media is supposed to inform people, not manipulate them. But too often, what we see today is an industry obsessed with narratives instead of facts. You sit here, asking loaded questions, trying to spin stories instead of reporting them. That's not journalism. That's activism. The host's lips pressed together. She had walked right into that one. Well, she said, attempting to pivot, your stance on media has certainly made you a polarizing figure. Some believe your rhetoric has contributed to division in the country. How do you respond? Trump leaned back, exuding confidence. I'll tell you what's divisive: politicians who put global interests above their own citizens. What's divisive is a media that pushes propaganda instead of truth. I love this country, and I fight for the American people. If that makes me polarizing, then I wear that as a badge of honor. The audience broke into applause once more, and the host glanced toward her producer. She was running out of angles. She inhaled deeply, choosing her next words carefully. Final question, Mr. Trump. There has been speculation that you may run for office again. Can you confirm or deny? Trump's eyes gleamed. You know, I get asked that all the time. And here's what I'll say: America deserves strong leadership. America deserves someone who puts the country first. So let's just say, you'll be hearing from me very soon. The audience erupted into cheers. The host, defeated yet composed, forced a final smile. Well, Mr. Trump, thank you for your time. This has certainly been an interesting discussion. Trump smirked. Anytime. The cameras faded to black, but the moment was far from over. Within hours, the interview would be dissected, debated, and replayed across networks and social media. But one thing was certain: Trump had, once again, turned the tables. The aftermath of the interview was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, clips began circulating across social media, news outlets, and online forums. Supporters hailed Trump's performance as a masterclass in turning the tables on a biased media, while critics scrambled to spin the narrative in their favor. But one thing was undeniable: the host had been caught off guard, and the internet wasn't letting her forget it. As the segment aired across different networks, political analysts dissected every moment. Some called Trump's responses a textbook example of media manipulation. Others admitted, begrudgingly, that he had effectively dismantled every trap laid before him. The host, once known for her cutting questions, now found herself the subject of scrutiny. Behind the scenes, her network was in damage control mode. Executives debated how to frame the fallout. Should they double down and claim Trump had bullied the host? Or should they admit that she had underestimated him? Neither option seemed ideal. Meanwhile, at a private gathering, Trump sat with close advisors, watching as the internet lit up. He smirked as headlines flashed across the screen. Trump shuts down host in viral interview. Media elite left speechless after Trump's fiery defense of family. Love, loyalty, and leadership: how Trump dominated his latest interview. One of his aides leaned over. Mr. Trump, the ratings for the segment are through the roof. People can't stop talking about it. Trump chuckled. Of course they can't. The media thinks they set the stage, but they forget, I don't play by their script. The aide nodded. They're already planning a response piece. Something about you being aggressive, dismissive, and avoiding real questions. Trump leaned back, unconcerned. Let them try. People saw what happened. They saw the setup. They saw the trap. And more importantly, they saw me tear it apart. That's what they'll remember. The conversation was interrupted as another advisor walked in, holding a phone. Sir, we just got word. The host, she's gone silent. No follow-up statements, no social media posts, nothing. Trump grinned. She's regrouping. Figuring out how to spin this. But it won't work. Not this time. As the days passed, the interview remained a dominant topic. Even neutral media outlets were forced to acknowledge that Trump had controlled the conversation. The host's credibility took a noticeable hit, and her usual confidence seemed shaken in subsequent appearances. Meanwhile, Trump's supporters celebrated the moment as another victory against what they saw as a dishonest media machine. The phrase, "trading up," became an ironic battle cry, with memes flooding the internet mocking the host's failed attempt to corner him. Eventually, the host re-emerged with a carefully crafted statement, attempting to reframe the interview as an opportunity to ask difficult questions. But it was too late. The moment had already passed, and the public had made up its mind. Trump, ever the showman, capitalized on the attention. At a rally a few weeks later, he referenced the interview directly. "They tried to set me up. They thought they had me. But what happened? We turned the tables. And you know what? They're still trying to figure out how it went so wrong for them." The crowd erupted in cheers. The host, once a dominant figure in political media, now faced an uphill battle to reclaim her reputation. But for Trump, it was just another day, another battle won in the never-ending war against what he called the fake news media. As the headlines eventually faded, one thing remained clear: the interview had backfired spectacularly, and the media's playbook would never be the same again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to 30 Minds and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for more exciting content.